I'm American, so in the spirit of Thanksgiving, thank you all for being here and putting in the time and effort to actually solve these problems that we're all working towards, and with different technologies and different geographies. So I'm going to talk about the opportunity of using invasive plants to scale up the bioeconomy. Yeah, it's urgent, and we need, the bioeconomy can be the hero. So just to tell you more about myself, so you know where I'm coming from, I originally thought I wanted to be a field scientist, so I did some research, worked with really cool scientists to discover new species of shrimp and bacteria from the cenotes in Mexico. And so I took this weird job, a scuba job in upstate New York, in Lake George, to remove invasive species. So it was underwater landscaping or underwater waste management. And I wondered what people were doing with the plants at the end, and saw that invasive plants were really everywhere. And so I went back to Houston, where I was in for school, to look at the potential uses for this waste, because every plant has a purpose. So yeah, 80% of all living matter is photosynthetic, and so it's so abundant, and we're building so many things and relying on plants. And my background's in ecology and evolutionary biology, so it's actually like it's a symbiosis for us to work in the bioeconomy and make things out of these plants, at the same time protecting the ecosystems from the threats of invasive plants. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about invasive plants in the next slide. Yeah, so green revival is the solution for invasive species. There's an excess. In some US states, it's 43% of all plants on the ground. It's everywhere. It starts wildfires. It's an infestation. Just like if you have a disease, you have all these symptoms, and you have to get rid of the source that shouldn't be there. And there's also demand for biomass, whether you've already secured it or you're looking to increase, decrease your risk and increase that supply. Green revival positions to be able to work on both of those problems at the same time, and we wouldn't be able to do either one without the supply or the demand. Okay, so yeah, if we do nothing, if we just don't use these plants, the wildfires like the Maui wildfires, extinctions of species, biodiversity collapse, health risks like allergies and tick disease from certain plants that just proliferate, spraying our fields with herbicides and pesticides ruin our land. And so we can't not use them. Like we have to do something with it, and the bioeconomy can do that. Yeah, and so it also comes with the great marketing, it's marketing too, to be able to say, look, we're making a great product, and at the same time, we're preventing wildfires, we're solving or decreasing tick disease, and so you can show with the scaling up of your company that there's less disease, that there's less disaster. Oops. So yeah, just a little bit of some more details. There's a certain plant called Japanese barberry in Pennsylvania, lots of ticks. The Maui wildfires were from a few invasive grasses. So if you didn't know that a root cause is these invasive plants, now you do. And so this is a graph about, at certain points, we just can't get rid of them. They're going to keep growing, they're going to keep spreading. When we can actually see the plants, then it's a little bit too late. You can locally get rid of it, but then it's going to keep spreading, because some plants, it's like 250,000 seeds from one plant. So it's a problem that's going to stay, and it's going to keep coming up with symptoms like wildfires and some extinctions and health issues. So we're doing long-term management. It's not short-term, so it's a long-term goal for all of us. So just to give one example of a success story, there's one invasive species, sargassum, and we work on land and in the water. I think drier plants are usually better to use. But to talk about seaweed, there's a company called Carbon Wave in Puerto Rico, and they're just taking up this excess of sargassum, creating fertilizer and cosmetic products at the moment, and eventually looking to get into more things. So when you have a feedstock that you know is going to stay and that is resilient, there's so much opportunity. So in terms of Canada, there's 486 invasive plant species. It's one of the leading causes of trees that are at risk in Canada. And if we just look specifically at the Great Lakes coastal wetlands, there's about 1 million metric tons right now just from 3 species. So there's so much more out there that we just have to look at and be able to make a plan, who gets what, who uses what. And then of the non-tree species in Canada, about a quarter is also alien or invasive, same thing. So this is funny, we service in around this region, but the Four Corners, there's a place called Sydney in Nova Scotia, which we talked about yesterday, Sydney in British Columbia, and so yeah. So yeah, also talking more about farmland loss, invasive plants, just cost, like farmers really care about getting rid of their invasive plants. And there's different landowners, whether private or public or even indigenous people, they all have a different angle of why they really, really want to get rid of it. And that story is part of the marketing and creating trust so that instead of these crazy protesters trying to stop everything and divest, they can actually invest their time and energy into something that matters. Yeah. So yeah, more pollen is another example. And yeah, we're starting to see on the East Coast more wildfires. So I think if we act earlier, then the West Coast will be able to prevent a lot of disasters. And so yeah, to talk more about green revival, so now that you kind of know more about the issue with the invasive plants and the journey it can go through, what we do at Green Revival is we go from like where it is and locate it and how to use it and like what we can do now. So we'll figure out how much there is in your location, and the more local the better, and it's everywhere, so you don't have to ship it from far away. We can test many species and figure out the best one if we're looking for a very specific use and a perfect fit in the biomass puzzle. Yeah, and we can go with supply agreements, whether we're doing the calls for you or we give you the list. And yeah, I'm going to talk more about policy compliance, because there's a lot of policies in Canada just related to invasive species, and this isn't talking about, yeah, so like a lot of the time the question is, can it spread at the same time? So right, there's a lot of gray areas. Is it compost? Is it invasive? And there's, if you understand the anatomy of the plant and the science, then it's easier to navigate these policies, as well as the carbon intensity that is lowered because we're not growing these invasive plants and we're preventing, it's a lot of avoidance and prevention of events that could spike up emissions. Yeah, so right now we're working on 2 projects. One with Hafner Energy, they're a French company coming to America, and in the Gulf Coast region in Texas, they're creating hydrogen for EV charging. And so just one plant species that we're planning to use is the Chinese tallow tree, and that's 23% of trees in Houston. But it also is in Florida, and it's, I'm not sure, but it could spread, and it might already be in Canada. I'm not sure, but it's possible. And then JJ Innovative Materials, that's what this article is about. They're a Johns Hopkins spin-out company making construction materials, so we're doing testing at the Johns Hopkins lab together. But yeah, to go back to the origin of Green Revival rather than the origin of me when I talked about scuba diving in Lake George and seeing, like being on the ground, grassroots, seeing the problem. I started Green Revival purposefully on the Jewish New Year for the trees. It's when it's in the winter, it was in January, so it's when the sap starts moving up, even though it's in the middle of winter when everything is dead. And I think that also represents the bioeconomy. We're seeing things decrease. We're seeing opportunities or positions or perspectives become negative when we're doing the work and we're bringing up the sap and we're bringing up like the life force to be able to make things and change really transition the economy to stewardship and taking care of the earth. So I actually talked to Rod at Greenspring, and he was saying, well, many people don't know if you see an invasive plant or not. They all look the same. They're all green, they're all leafy or grassy. And so it's right in front of all of our eyes. If you just drive down the highway, you could see it on the side, and if you start paying attention, it's everywhere. So like when I'm driving, I just see them everywhere. So it's an opportunity in front of your eyes, even more now because I'm up here. So yeah, if you want to talk more, come find me.